Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. One other thing that keeps coming up all the time is this topic of headlines. And I was talking to Renuka the other day, and she said, you don't cover so many podcasts with regards to headlines. So here I am covering another podcast with regard to headlines, except these are 3 recurring questions that come up with headlines. The first question is, when do you write your headlines, at the beginning or end? The second is how or why more powerful when writing headlines? And then the third one, which is really interesting, is how to use contrast to prevent headlines from going flat. These are very cool techniques, and you might want to listen to this a couple of times or read the transcript as well, because they will help you a lot. Let's start out with the first one, which is, when do you write your headlines? At the beginning or the end? The short answer is mostly at the end, but the long answer is more interesting. Most of the time I'll have an idea for an article, and so I'll outline it, I will write the article, and then finally I'll add the headline. About 70 to 80% of the time, the headline will come in last, often minutes before the article has to be queued or published. Or maybe I've just recorded a podcast and it's going out, and in such a situation, that headline needs to be in pretty much at the last minute, which is why headline writing needs to be practiced almost like you're in a flight simulator. Simulator training is about flying, but it's also about not crashing. And since most of your headlines are likely to be written when you're hungry, when you're tired, and when you just want to finish off things, it needs to be second nature. Just like a pilot faced with a plane falling out of the sky, you need to be able to get that headline to safety. And if you've done enough headline practice, and if you are watching for the specifics, then this last minute type of headline writing is no trouble at all. And if you noticed, I said that most of the headlines, which is 70 to 80%, are written right at the end. However, there are times when I'm walking back home and I'll get an idea for an article. In such a situation, the headline might pop into my head as well. So I will jot it down, or I'll record it on my watch. I have an app, it's called Just Press Record. And I just press record. It's actually the name of the app, Just Press Record. And so you'll have some kind of dictation app. It doesn't matter which one it is, but I dictate into it, and the difference is that Just Press Record also transcribes it so that when I come back, I don't have to think of playing it 20 times over. Anyway, I will press Just Press Record and then keep dictating the core ideas. And in such a situation, it's usually the headline that comes first, and then a brief outline which I'm working out in my brain, and the article will be written a lot later, possibly even weeks later. But there is another situation when the headline comes first, and that is when you brainstorm ideas. Now, most of us might depend on having to write that headline or something popping into our heads as we are walking, but brainstorming is a very ninja move. And that's because even a tiny tweak in your headline can be the basis of a completely different article. So let's take a few examples. Let's say the base headline is how to write articles. And then you just tweak a little bit and you go, how to write articles in under 45 minutes every single time, or how to write articles that CEOs read and gets ignored by the general public, or how to write objection-filled articles that make readers sit up and take notice, or how to write articles with stories that snap readers out of their world and into yours. Want me to keep going? One more. How to write, there are many more, but I'll give you one more. How to write articles that get fewer clicks but more long-term clients. So notice what's happening here. It was just a simple non-descriptive headline, which is how to write articles. And from that one puny headline, we were able to generate 8 separate headlines. I just read 4 or 5 to you. But these tweaks would not take you more than 2 to 3 minutes each. And now what you've got is about 8 different directions that you're going in. And this is through brainstorming. This isn't through this system of hoping that something's going to pop in your head. You're tweaking one little bit, maybe how to write it quickly, or how to write it with a more flowery bent, or how to write to CEOs. And you're putting in that little extra bit that then takes the article off in a different direction. Which brings us to the end of the first question, which is, when do you write the headline? Well, you write at the beginning, or you write it at the end, or you strategize by brainstorming, and that gives you a lot more articles to work with. This takes us to the second question, which is how or why the more powerful tool when writing headlines? Every 2 years or so, we conduct the headline course. And in the headline course, most of the clients go through about, 250 headlines each. And I read about 10,500 headlines over the duration of the course. And in the last week or so, they have to audit my headlines. And when they go through that process, they realize that I'm actually only writing 2 headlines. Even though we teach them how to write 8 different types of headlines, the crux of it really boils down to how and why. So if you go back all the way to 2000, and now we're almost 19 years, almost the 20th year down the line, just how and why. And you will learn online that there are cheat sheets and all of this fancy stuff. But if you just deconstruct a headline, if you just go to psychotactics.com/podcast and you look at all the headlines and deconstruct them, you will find that most of them are how or why. About 80% of them are how or why. I think it's about 82%. Anyway, the question is, how do you know when to use how or why when writing headlines? And the answer is your headline obvious? And what do you mean by obvious? Well, obvious is when the headline is just giving away the entire plot. There's no need to read an article when you have a headline that gives away the entire plot. What do we mean by this? Well, let's take a few examples. Why you need to sit still when meditating. See that? That's pretty obvious. The whole story is already in the headline. Why should I read the article? So why you need to sit still when meditating. We'll tweak that. Headline number 2 is why your kids will get a cold when in a room full of snotty kids. You see that? That's pretty obvious as well. And the third one, how a shot of whiskey makes commuting at peak times stress-free. Now all of these headlines are boring, and you think, I don't know how to fix these boring headlines. They seemed fine when I was writing them, but you just have to go from why to how. So let's use a how for the same headlines. So why you need to sit still when meditating becomes how to sit still when meditating. And now suddenly there's curiosity. Second headline, why your kids get a cold when in a room full of snotty kids. How to keep your kids from getting a cold in a room full of snotty kids. Third headline, how a shot of whiskey makes commuting at peak times stress-free. Why a rationed shot of whiskey makes commuting at peak times stress-free. And this is how you turn an obvious headline into something quite magical, quite curious. Always just interchange it. Put the how where the why is, why where the how is, and look at whether the curiosity ramps up. And if it does, then you have a winner. Okay, so we've covered quite a bit of headline territory, but there's still the third one, and that is how to use contrast to prevent headlines from going flat. This is very cool, by the way. But I feel like telling you a story, so I'm going to tell you a story. So yesterday I wore a blue t-shirt and a pair of blue jeans, and immediately I was told off by Renuka simply because there was no contrast. Maybe if I wore a dark blue t-shirt and light blue jeans, that would be fine. But no, I had to choose exactly the same shade, and I got instant disapproval. Headlines also require a good dose of contrast because it instantly pitches two forces against each other. And here's what Lynn Winslow did on the course. So one of the examples I'd given had contrast, but Lynn took it and she did all the headlines with contrast. Headline 1. How to turn negative feedback into positive praise. Headline number 2. Ugly baby bottlenecks. How to get past client resistance and close sales. Headline number 3. How to recapture lost leads and quickly refill your pipeline. And the fourth one. How to close your sales even when your presentation fails. And you would have figured it out. You could see the problem and the solution, and that's contrast. If you introduce a problem at the beginning of the headline, and then you swing to the other way at the end of the headline, bringing in a solution, a result, then immediately you've got the attention. You can start off with the solution and go to the problem. It doesn't matter which way you go, as long as you have that contrast, the problem and the solution. And in your head, you probably can think of when the problem comes in and then the solution, but what about the other way? Well, we just did that. How to close sales, that's a solution, even when your presentation fails. So it doesn't matter which way it goes. It could have been how your presentation can fail and you can still close sales. A little clunkier there in terms of how I'm saying it, but you get the idea. You can go either way, and yet you can write great headlines. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. It was a short podcast, but look, you learned 3 really good techniques. And the first is the brainstorming technique. So the first question was, when do you write your headlines? At the beginning or the end? And you can write your headlines at the beginning sometimes when you think of an idea, when you're walking or when you listen to something. But most of the time, you're going to be doing it right at the end. The best way, of course, is to brainstorm the headlines. If you brainstorm the headlines and just make a little tweak, what you get is a substantially better headline, more curious headline. And if you want to write great articles, then I suggest that you don't do what I do, which is write headlines at the end, but instead sit down and brainstorm them, and you will get a bunch of articles and really good headlines. The second thing is how or why more powerful. And now you remember this, don't you? Because if the how headline is really boring, just make it a why headline, and immediately you will find that it's far more curious because of the way you look at it. If it's the why that's boring, you make it a how headline, and there's nothing more to be said there, is there? Except there's the third point, and that is how to use contrast to prevent headlines from going flat. And if you start off with the problem, go to the solution. The solution needs to be a result. If there's a result, that's even better. So you can start with the solution, go to the problem, go from the problem to the solution, doesn't matter which way. But when there's contrast, immediately you start to ramp up that curiosity. And what's the one thing you can do today? That one thing that you can do and everybody should do is do their brainstorming activity. So take a really simple headline like how to write an article and then write it in 8 different ways. And that's an exercise that is not going to be wasted. It's going to be such a cool exercise for you to do. The headline course is quite infrequent, maybe once every 2 years, sometimes longer. But you take these 3 tips and you will go much further down the road in terms of writing headlines. And that's pretty much when we find out what's happening in psychotactics land. And, we're in mid-December here, which means it's summer, which means I have a stack of books that I want to read, mostly historical books, and get some rest before we get into 2020. And what does 2020 hold for us? Well, right on the 25th of Jan, we have the Info Products self-study course. Now, if you've been wondering, how do I create an info product that's not just another information-based something, but a product where the client is almost compelled to go from the first section to the second section and from the second to the third and finish that. And the whole crux of it is, how do you get them to finish it? Just like if you've read the brain audit, you're likely to have finished it. The reason for finishing it is how you construct it, how you structure it. And this is what the Info Products course is all about. It shows you how to structure your info product, whether it be audio or video or text, in a way that the client finishes it. And when they finish it, then they come back for the second one and the third one and the fourth one. And that's how we've existed at Psychotactics for all of these years. We haven't done much advertising. In fact, we've done no advertising, no publicity, no joint ventures. Well, probably 3 or 4, but that's very few for the last 20 years. And yet clients keep coming back, and they come back for the second helping and the third helping and the fourth helping. And that's precisely what you need to do as well. So that's 25th of Jan. To get on the waiting list, there are only 25 copies. You have to go to psychotactics.com/info goodies. So everything is called goodies, and it's just info that you need to slide in, and you can get that. The 21st of March and the 28th of March is when the article writing course is out. And I'll give you more details about that later. But just so you know, the 21st of March and 28th of March are article writing dates. We'll talk about that later. Right now, it's almost time for us to close this year. We'll start on the reruns shortly. And thank you for listening. And that's me, Sean D'Souza, saying bye for now. Bye-bye. Still listening? The Headlines course is very special for me. We've done many courses over the years and continue to do them. But the Headlines course was the first time that we had a very specific result. Now, when you look at all the courses, whether they're self-study or they're handheld or they're workshops, they all have this very specific result. You can benchmark, with the Headlines course, for instance, it says you can write 8 different headlines in under 10 minutes. You know by the time you finish that course that you can do it or not. It's very clear. There's no ambiguity about it. So that was the first time that we had a course with that much clarity. And since then, we've gone on to do many courses with the same clarity. Well, that kind of set the framework. Interestingly, it came almost 10 years after we started. And for most of our clients, they've been lucky in the sense that we could have this discussion earlier and they don't have to wait for 10 years. And so they get into 5000 BC and we talk about how they can promise that exact result. Because when you have that exact result, that's the kind of thing that clients are looking for, especially when you have so much information and people are just sick of it. they really don't want more information. They want a result. And we've done that at Psychotactics. And if you're struggling to do it, there's 5000 BC. But that's how we go about discussing this topic in 5000 BC. I'll see you in the next year. We still have the reruns. They're all good reruns. I suggest you listen to them. Take long walks, whether it's cold in your part of the world or warm like it is here. And bye for now. Bye-bye.